Hello everyone and welcome back. As promised, from this session onwards, we will learn about the primary or the main memory in details. So without any further ado, let's get to learning. Now during our previous sessions, specifically during the discussions of various cache memory mapping techniques, we referred to the primary memory on several encounters. But in reality, we had been referring to a specific type of primary memory, that is, the random access memory. Apart from this, there is another type of primary memory, that is, the read-only memory. And as the name implies, the read-only memory or the ROM is primarily used to read the information which is stored in it. Now ROM generally stores firmware, and firmwares are basically the softwares, or in other words, the set of instructions which are hardwired or permanently stored in the ROM. And for this reason, ROMs are non-volatile. That means ROM can retain data even if the power is turned off. On the other hand, the random access memory or the RAM is volatile. That is, it can't retain any data once the power is turned off. Its working principle is kind of similar to the plates that we use while we are eating. Once we are done eating, we wash that plate and keep it for later use, don't we? So basically, the plate retains the food during the time when we eat. The working principle of the RAM is somewhat similar to this. Anyway, since in the session of Introduction to Memory, we have mostly talked about the architecture of RAM, so now from this session onwards, we will mainly observe the architecture of read-only memories. We just learnt about firmwares, didn't we? So such an instance of firmware is BIOS, that stands for Basic Input-Output System. Now this particular firmware is actually loaded in a ROM chip which is called the BIOS chip, and it resides inside the motherboard. It contains a bootstrap program. Let me illustrate what it does. When we turn our computers on, generally we either see screens similar to this one or the screen prompted by the motherboard showing its manufacturer information. Thereafter, it loads for a while, and finally we see the login page of the operating system. Now here onwards, the operating system will deal with all the events. For an instance, performing a particular task issued by a mouse click or managing the RAM space while multiple programs are running. But think about it, until the operating system is loaded into the computer's memory, none of these would be possible. So we also need the program which can load operating system into the RAM every time we use the system. And this bootstrap is the program for that, which is hardwired in the BIOS ROM chip. Now when we turn our systems on, we see this screen. It's called POST screen. POST stands for Power On Self-Test. Generally it is done to make sure whether the system is okay to be deployed. So at first, the BIOS chip itself is checked, and thereafter the CMOS chip is checked. Now this particular chip is not a ROM chip, it's a volatile chip. And that is the reason why this battery is plugged in here. In CMOS chip, the BIOS settings is maintained. If you notice, in this POST screen at the bottom of the screen, either the delete key or any of the function keys is prompted. Pressing that, we can get to this screen, where some of the modifications like date and time settings, boot sequence, etc. can be configured. However, these all will be reset if we remove the CMOS battery. Now once the BIOS and the CMOS chips are checked and found okay, thereafter the processor is initialized. And finally, all the associated hardware components are tested like keyboard, mouse, RAM modules, etc. If they are okay, the process execution is moved further after a single beep. Otherwise, some beep codes are generated, like if we hear continuous beeping, that means the RAM module is not plugged in correctly, and in such cases, many of us unplug our RAM modules from the motherboard, clean it with an eraser, thereafter clean the module connector on the motherboard with a brush, and finally plug it back in. So once all the POST functions are executed successfully, then the BIOS instruction stored in the Bootstrap program looks for the valid boot disk where the operating system is permanently stored. Generally, storages like optical disks, flash drives, hard disks, SSDs, etc. are used for this purpose. Now, once that is found and we see the login page, that signifies that the operating system is now loaded on the RAM. So all these are programmed in the BIOS chip, which is basically a read-only memory chip. That brings us the thought how it's all done. What's the architecture of ROM? How do we program in the instructions in a ROM? Alright, so let's begin with the architecture. Now the IC of the ROM looks kind of like this. If we consider the block view, the inside of a ROM is organized as this. Basically, we have the decoder combinational circuit, and this grid of connections is known as ROM matrix. Now, in order to understand this circuit and its working principle, let's revise some of the concepts of digital electronics. In digital electronics, if you remember, we have a combinational circuit known as multiplexer, which is also known as data selector. If you consider this particular one, it has 4 input lines, I0, I1, I2 and I3. Based on these 2 select lines, any of the input lines will be produced as output. Basically, for the combination 0, 0, I0 will be produced as output. In case of 0, 1, I1 will be the output. For 1, 0, I2 will be selected as output, and finally for 1, 1, I3 will be selected as output. Basically, from many input lines, one will be selected and produced as output. On the other hand, we have the demultiplexer circuit. It performs just the opposite of the multiplexer. Here, based on the select lines, the input is propagated to any of the desired output lines. That is why the demultiplexer is also known as data distributor. Let's try and understand the architecture of the DMUX. In case of this particular circuit, it has 2 select lines, 1 input and 4 output lines. Internally, there are 4 AND gates where S1, S0 and the input line I is fed into the respective gates, which eventually produce the output lines. Now in this particular circuit, if we change the select lines and the input line as the inputs and enable lines respectively, the circuit gets converted to a decoder circuit. So a decoder is demultiplexer without any data input. And if observed closely, since the select lines are converted as input lines, therefore for n input lines, we end up having 2 to the power n output lines. Even if we observe this particular decoder circuit, here the number of input lines is 2, that is I1 and I0, whereas the number of output lines is 2 square, that is 4, which are O0, O1, O2 and O3. So in short, we can deduce that the configuration of the decoder is n by 2 to the power n. Let's analyze the working principle of this decoder circuit using the truth table. Here we have 3 input lines E, I1 and I0, where E is the enable line. Also, we have 4 output lines. Now if E remains 0 or off, in that case, whatever the input may be, since one of the inputs of every AND gate is 0, therefore all the output lines will produce 0 only. So from now onwards, we will consider the enable line to be high, that is always set to 1. Now if I1 and I0 both are set to 0, observe, due to these bubbles, both zeros will be set as 1s, and E is already set to 1. Hence, this particular AND gate will be selected and only the output O0 will produce 1, because for this I0 will be fed as 0 and for this AND gate I1 will be fed as 0. Finally, for this AND gate, both I1 and I0 will be fed as 0 only. Hence, For all these, the produced output will be 0 only. Now if I1 and I0 are 0 and 1, this AND gate will be selected. Observe closely. For this, 0 propagated through I1 will be converted by this bubble and fade into the AND gate as 1. So since all the input lines in the AND gate are 1s, hence the output of O1 will produce 1 only. For the rest, here I0 will be fed as 0 for this particular bubble, and here I1 itself is fed as 0. Therefore, all these will produce 0 only. Consider the next input sequence for I1 and I0, that is 1 and 0. For this particular AND gate will be selected because of this particular bubble through which value 0 propagated through I0 will be turned into 1, and since for this particular AND gate all the input lines are high, O2 will produce 1 only, and due to this same organization, all the other output lines will produce 0 only. Finally, for the input sequence 1, 1, this particular AND gate will be selected as all the input lines are 1s, so only O3 will produce 1 and the rest of the output lines will generate zeros. Now if we consider the truth table, when O0 is producing 1, it's actually representing the input sequence 0, 0, that is I1 bar, I0 bar. So when O1 is producing 1, it is the input sequence 0, 1, that is I1 bar, I0 being represented by this output line. Similarly, when O2 is producing 1, the input sequence 1, 0, that is I1, I0 bar is being represented by it. Finally, when O3 is producing 1, it's actually representing the input sequence 1, 1, that is I1 and I0. So basically, these are all the input combinations possible using the input lines I1 and I0. In other words, these are the minterms for two input Boolean variables. And we all know if we use OR gates, we can implement any function involving two Boolean variables in their SOP or sum of products form. In simpler words, using decoder, if we want to implement any function, all we need is some extra OR gates. Let me show this to you all. Now let's try to construct the half adder circuit using decoder, shall we? You all remember half adder, right? It is basically the circuit that helps us add two binary inputs or bits. Now these are all possible combinations for two input bits. So when we add 0 and 0, we get the sum as 0 and also the carry as 0. Now what's the carry? Suppose we are to add two decimal numbers 28 and 17. If we consider the units place, we have 7 and 8. And addition of that gives us 15 as result. But we can't keep 1 in here. Rather, we will carry this 1 and place it with the digits in the tens place, which finally gives us the result as 45. So, this is the reason why it is called carry. Now when we add 0 and 1, we acquire the 1 as sum and 0 as carry. Similarly, we add 1 and 0, we again get 1 as sum and 0 as carry. Finally, adding two ones gives us 0 as sum and 1 as carry. Now minterm wise, this is the minterm 0, this is 1, this is 2, and finally the last one is 3. So the function sum is the SOP of the minterms 1 and 2. And the function carry is the minterm 3 itself. So if we take a 2 to 4 decoder, it will actually produce all the minterms M0 to M3. Now if we feed the output lines M1 and M2 to an OR gate, we obtain the sum, and the output line M3 gives us the carry. Now this particular circuit becomes a half adder circuit constructed with a 2 to 4 decoder. Nonetheless, the same can be implemented in a different way as well. There, we will again need the same decoder circuit, but instead of the OR gates, we will now have connections for each function. Always remember, all the outgoing lines from the decoder and the lines for the functions are called connections, And these intersections are known as links. Now, if we take a closer look, initially all the links are connected. When we program some logic in this organization, we burn the links which are not really required to represent a specific function. For an instance, if we want this particular connection to represent sum, we will only need M1 and M2. Therefore, for this connection, the link of M0 will be burnt, and similarly, the link of M3 will have to be burnt. And finally, this connection will represent the function sum. Now, in order to represent carry using this connection, we need to burn the links of M0, M1 and M2. Only the link of M3 will generate the carry. Now, this is half adder using a decoder and ROM matrix. And this is how we program the logic of these two sum and carry functions in this hardware. Now think about the BIOS ROM chip. Of course, in order to store that entire bootstrap program in it, the decoder will have to be a 1 with a higher configuration, and also the ROM matrix will undoubtedly be a very complex one. So this is the basic ideology behind the architecture of ROM. Now let's talk about the classification of ROMs. Now ROMs are basically of three types. The first one is programmable ROM or PROM. Blank PROM chips can be bought inexpensively and coded by anyone using a special tool called programmer. In the blank PROM chip, initially all the fuses or the links are connected indicating a value of 1. So to change the value to 0, the programmer tool should be used to send higher voltage to burn out the desired fuse as we observed earlier. This process is known as burning the PROM. Now PROMs can be programmed only once. Coming to the next type is the erasable programmable ROM or EPROM. These chips can be rewritten many a times. In EPROMs, erasing requires ultraviolet light of frequency 253.7 and the EPROM should be closer than 2 inches to the eraser's light source to work properly. Finally, the electrically erasable programmable ROM or the EEPROM. Here, instead of UV light using an electric field, the targeted cells of EEPROM can be erased. It can be reprogrammed about 10,000 times. A modern type of EEPROM is called flash memory, which can be rewritten more than 1,000,000 times. So, these are the various types of ROMs available. Alright people, that will be all for this session. I hope now the architecture of ROM is clear to you all. In the next session, we will get into more architectural details of ROM. So I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you all for watching.